So if you watched my test ride video, I discovered that I had a blown fork seal here. You can see the oil and dirt on it, and it's still leaking on the floor. There's a spot right there. And it was really not handling very well at all. I found a video on YouTube that showed a pretty easy way you could skip a lot of the disassembly, and I'm going to try that out. This method allows you to change your fork seals without disassembling the fork tubes. The first step is to drain the fork oil with the drain bolts on the bottom of the fork sliders. Make sure you release any pressure from the tubes through the Schrader valves on top of the fork tube caps. Otherwise, the pressure will make the oil burst out of the drain hole all over your freshly painted motorcycle table. You can imagine how I found this out. This step could be done after the forks are removed, but I thought it would be easier with them still on the bike. Once the forks are drained, you could remove the tack cable and the brake line from the clips that hold them to the forks. My bike has a fork brace that will need to be removed before proceeding. And then the wheel comes off, before finally loosening the triple clamp pinch bolts and removing the fork assemblies. One thing to notice, when you have this much luggage, you need to be careful not to let the bike fall over backwards once the weight of the front wheel is removed. I like to keep a stack of boards handy to wedge under the rear tire. With the bike properly resecured, I proceed with the fork removal. Before taking them to the workbench, there is more oil in the forks that must be pumped out by sliding the fork tube in and out of the slider. This is important because you need to fit the proper amount of new oil in the fork once the seals are changed. Now is a good time to remove the fork boots by loosening the hose clamp at the top. Now at the workbench, we can remove the retaining clips that hold the dust covers and other fork internals in. Make sure you clean and inspect the fork tubes thoroughly at this step. Any dirt or gouges can ruin new fork seals upon installation. If you do find gouges, it doesn't mean you can't use the tubes. You just need to make sure you sand down the high spots with emery cloth before proceeding. My tubes look good, so I can proceed. This method of extracting the fork seals utilizes the Schrader valve in the fork caps to pressurize the tubes. It takes about 40 to 50 psi to get the seals to pop. I used some t-shirt material to wrap around the tubes to catch any leftover oil that could spray out. You will notice there are 4 pieces that come out: a bushing, a washer, a fork seal, and a dust cap. Be sure to note the orientation of the seal, as these only work in one direction. Remove the dust cap and fork seal and push the bushing and washer back into the slider. The next step is to oil the new fork seal and place it in the right direction over the tube and slide it down. A 2-inch piece of PVC pipe is the perfect diameter to drive the new seals into their seats. A couple of blows with a rubber mallet and you can hear them settle in. Clean the dust covers and place them back on the sliders and replace the retaining clips. To refill the tubes with fork oil, there are 2 different methods: on the bike and off the bike. I didn't know which way would be easier, so I tried both. The on the bike method, you use the lower triple clamp to hold the tube so you can remove the cap and pour in the 350 cc's of fork oil. Notice the spacers are only an inch or so long. Yours will more likely be between 2 and 4 inches long, depending on if you have stock or aftermarket springs. Longer spacers will make it much more difficult to remove and install fork caps. Just make sure you're prepared for the force of the spring as you loosen the cap. The off-the-bike method involves clamping the fork tube in order to remove the cap. I found it is much easier to remove the caps when clamped on the bike, but it was easier to fill with oil off the bike. Ultimately, I decided it was easier on the bike as long as you have a long funnel. It made it much easier to get out the fork cap. Here I edited out the part where I installed the fork tubes without the fork boots installed. They're easy to forget and a lot of work if you do. Given my handling problems I talked about in the prior video, I decided to set the fork tubes up in the triple clamp a half an inch. I used a set of calipers to ensure that I set both tubes at the same level without tightening pinch bolts. A trick to get the wheel and fork tubes aligned is to install the wheel first and tighten the axle and work your way up. If the pinch bolts are loose, the axle will pull everything into alignment. Then you could recheck the fork tube levels and tighten the triple clamp pinch bolts. Reinstall the brake caliper, brake line, and tack cable. Finally, the fork brace gets reinstalled and the fork boots get placed into position. This was the first time I had done fork seals, and I was able to complete the job in a little over an hour. I'm pretty sure I could get it done about half that time now that I know what I'm doing. This method should work for any fork that uses air valve in the fork cap. Any other fork would involve removing the slider from the tube and dealing with a lot more parts. If you have any pointers for viewers wanting to learn how to do this, please leave them in the comments. I'm sure there are tricks I didn't figure out that could save them time. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and share my videos with people who would appreciate what I'm doing. Also, I love to hear feedback or topics that you would like me to cover. Thanks for watching.